Hi everyone, welcome to the Ultra Dynamics channel. This is the second part of the ALM and DevOps series options for Power Platform. In the first part of the series, I introduced ALM and DevOps and provided you with a high-level overview of the different options for implementing ALM and DevOps for Power Platform. Here is a link to the first part in case you haven't seen it. In today's video, we will take a closer look at Power Platform APIs and CLIs for ALM and DevOps. Here is a quick recap from part 1. This is the diagram that shows the different options for implementing ALM and DevOps for Power Platform. In today's video, we will be discussing automation toolkits and platform APIs in a little bit more detail. Let's take a look at what I will be covering in today's video. I will start with an overview of key platform APIs that are relevant to ALM and DevOps. Then I will talk about some of the CLIs and PowerShell modules that you can use. I will also show you some examples of how to use these. Next, I will tell you about the pros and cons of these options. And finally, I will try to score these options as well and finish with some key takeaways. Before I jump into today's topic, my name is Wael Hamzi and I'm a Microsoft Business Applications MVP. In this channel, I like to share with you some of the things that I have learned and continue to learn having worked over 20 years on Microsoft Business Applications. Here are some of the channels where I share content. You are more than welcome to connect with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you find this content to be helpful. Before we jump into APIs, let's take a look at a typical DevOps pipeline. This is probably the most commonly used pattern, especially on projects that don't have automation yet. It is also the easiest to implement, so it is a good candidate to use when comparing different options. In this scenario, we have one development environment and we have one solution that we want to promote from dev into test and then prod. Let's assume that we start with version 1.0.0.0 on dev. Team makes some changes to the solution. Once we are ready to promote into test, we increase the build version, export the solution, and then import into test. This solution will go through a number of iterations before it is ready for production. Once the team is happy with it, let's assume version 1.0.0.2, we import the solution into production. Now the team can start to work on the next release. We will increase the major or minor version of the solution. In this scenario, the team will increase the version to 2.0. Same cycle continues now to promote the changes from dev into prod. Below are the key actions that would be required to automate this setup. 1, we have to update the solution version in dev. 2, publish the customizations before we perform an export. 3, export the solution from dev. I would normally recommend storing this in an artifact repository. And 4, import the solution into the target environments and perform any additional configuration required to make the apps work as expected. In the next sections, we will take a look at some of the implementation details to make this work. As you may already know, most of the ALM capabilities in Power Platform are provided by Dataverse. Dataverse has a very rich set of APIs that include capabilities such as managing metadata for your Dataverse tables, full CRUD and query operations, and also some special operations for specific activities. You can invoke the Dataverse APIs from most programming languages and scripting languages such as C#, .NET, and PowerShell. Note you may need to worry about some of the authentication details when working with APIs. Now let's take a look at what it would take to automate our previous solution flow using Dataverse APIs. I have mapped the steps we covered previously into API calls. As you can see, one step can take several API calls. For example, to import a solution, first you need to call the import async API. This gives you back an async job ID. Then you need to call the get job status several times to track the status of the import job. And finally, once the import job completes, you need to call yet another API to get the full import log. As you can see, a simple import step is likely to require a fair amount of code and programming knowledge to do this. If you plan to create your automation code in .NET, you will want to take a look at the Dataverse.NET SDKs. These are wrappers for the .NET and take care of things like authentication and low-level details for you. In addition to Dataverse Web APIs, Power Platform Web APIs are the latest addition to the API suite. Note that at the time of writing, these are still in preview. These APIs can be helpful in automating some DevOps tasks, especially when provisioning new environments. For example, the App Management API allows you to install an application into a target environment, and the Power Pages API allows you to create a new website and restart an existing website. Before we talk about some of the Power Platform PowerShell capabilities, in case you have not used PowerShell, PowerShell is a scripting language which was aimed initially at automation of administrative tasks. Using PowerShell, you can create scripts for automating common ALM tasks. You can execute these scripts locally or via an automation platform such as Azure DevOps. Power Platform provides several PowerShell modules for automating many of the ALM and administration tasks. One of the main modules is Power Apps Admin module. This includes capabilities such as environment management. This is useful for creating new test environments as an example. You can also manage the permissions for apps and flows. These are useful for sharing apps after importing a solution. The module also provides capabilities to manage connection and custom connectors. You can also find some capabilities for managing DLP policies. These can be useful when needing to automate DLP changes in addition to importing your solutions. In addition to the main Power Apps admin module, there are also other modules available which help with the automation of specific tasks. The Power Apps Checker module is a module that allows you to analyze your exported solution. This process checks your solution against several best practices. The checkers will not only analyze your configuration, but also check your plugins and web resources. The checker can highlight a number of issues with your solution, so you can make an informed decision whether to proceed with your solution deployment or fix the issues before proceeding. The issues are classified into different severities to help make analysis easier and allow you to focus on the important ones first. If you want to learn a bit more about the Power Platform PowerShell modules, Microsoft Learn is a very good source. This page, for example, lists you all the modules that are available for Power Platform, including some of the information how to get started. So, for example, if you want to know how to use the Power Apps admin module, this page walks you through the instructions in terms of how you install the module. Once you install the module, the next step would be to basically authenticate and log in to the tenant. So you have a number of ways of doing that. Basically, use the add Power Apps account commandlet, and you can either use a service principal or you can use a username and password as well. It also explains how to get help so you can understand a bit more around how to use specific commandlets. If you want to go into a bit more details, there is obviously the reference documentation as well. So for the admin module, we can see the list of all the commandlets that are available within that module. So for example, if you want to drill down into the get DLP policy commandlet, you can see all the syntax information here and how to use it. So let's take a quick look around how to use some of these commandlets. So for example, if you want to find out about the tenant settings, so I know you can look at the tenant settings through the UI and you can change these settings, but if you wanted to do some automation, this is a great way to just find out about some of the tenant settings that you have currently set in the tenant. There's also another command that would set the tenant settings, so you can use that to change the tenant settings. If you want to, for example, get the list of DLP policies as well, you can use the get DLP policy commandlet, which lists you all the DLP policies. And then if you want to find out more information around the specific DLP policy, you could get the DLP policy by ID. You can get the ID either from the previous commandlet or from the administration portal. So for example, this policy contains a number of properties. So you can see the default classification is blocked. And equally, there is Other commandlets you can use as well to update the DLP policies, or maybe just to monitor what your DLP policies are currently set to as well. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a feel in terms of how to use the PowerShell modules and where to find a bit more information about them. In addition to the PowerShell modules provided by Microsoft, you can also find a lot of PowerShell modules that are provided by the community and other vendors. These can be useful when you can't find the required capability in Microsoft modules, or if it will take a decent effort to build these using Microsoft APIs. The XRM CI framework has been around for over 10 years now, and it contains PowerShell commandlets and scripts for the common ALM activities. Whilst most of the core capabilities are now part of the platform SDKs, the module still contains some useful capabilities such as managing service endpoints, deployment of plugin assemblies, deploying and updating web resources, managing themes, splitting data files, and many more. I encourage you to take a look at it and see if you can find something useful that can help you with your automations. You can either use the common logic via .NET, or you can utilize the PowerShell commandlets or scripts. This is an open source framework that you can find on GitHub. The code on GitHub is also a very good example of how you can use the Dataverse.NET SDKs to create custom PowerShell commandlets, and also how to use some of the out-of-the-box PowerShell modules and CLIs. So here's the XRM CI framework open source solution that I was referring to earlier. You can find it on GitHub. So for example, if you want to take a look at some of the sample code from using the .NET SDKs, you can go into the latest version of Dynamics, then look at the common library, which contains most of the common logic for .NET. So for the solution management, you can go into this folder and you can see there's a number of different classes that do solution management. The main one is the solution manager. So you can see, for example, there is an import method here that imports the solution. So if you scroll down a little bit, you can see there's lots of checks for making sure things like the solution file is there, it's in the right format. But once you kind of go past that, you can see there is the creation of the solution import request, which takes a number of parameters, including the solution file itself and some additional options, like whether you want to publish the workflows. And once you create that request, then the next step would be to execute the async requests, which, as you can see, returns back the async response. And the async response will have the asynchronous job ID, which then this piece of code that comes next basically goes through and waits for that job to complete. And then once the job is completed, then there is another function that does the verification as well. So as you can see, it's quite easy to use the .NET SDKs, but there is a fair amount of work to make the whole solution import thing works seamlessly. XRM Data is yet another open source PowerShell module. I encourage you to take a look at this one for two reasons. One, it has some useful features like managing mailboxes, language packs, and settings, which are very useful, especially when working with Dynamics 365 projects. Two, it is a good example of how to utilize the Dataverse web APIs that we've spoken about earlier using PowerShell. If your app relies on reference data, you will want to take a look at the configuration migration tool. This tool allows you to export your data from a source environment and import it into a target environment. You can use the desktop app to create your schema and perform the export and import operations. However, you can also use the PowerShell module to automate the export and import of your data as well. If you have worked on a Power Apps or Dynamics 365 project, you probably already know that while importing a solution gets you about 80% there are still lots of things you need to worry about, and in a lot of cases end up doing manually after the solution import. The package deployer is a template that allows you to build a package for deploying your full application. This will include your solutions, any data that goes with it, and any additional steps you want to perform after the solution imports. The package deployer comes with a desktop app that you can use to test the deployment of your package, but you can also use the PowerShell module, which you can use to automate the deployment of this package using PowerShell. Finally, let's talk about the Power Platform CLI. As you may have already noticed, there are a lot of APIs, PowerShell modules, and tools out there. The CLI aims to provide a one-stop shop for all your ALM, DevOps, and administration needs. It is built using some of the capabilities I spoke about earlier and is regularly updated with new features. You can use the CLI by either downloading and installing the MSI package or using the NuGet library, which will be a more suitable option when using with CI/CD tools. Let's take a quick look at how you can use the Power Platform CLI. If you want to get started with Power Platform CLI, the Microsoft Learn site is a very good source of information. As you can see, you can find out information around how you install the Power Platform CLI from different sources. Once you've installed the CLI, you can tell whether it's installed or not by using commands as well. And you can find out the version that you have installed in case you need to update. I would recommend updating it quite frequently as there's new features coming in all the time. Once you've installed it, basically you need to connect to an environment. You can connect to as many environments as you need, but basically you create a connection and you add that environment to your list of available connections, and then you can use these connections to execute basically different commands. Once you've done that, then you can take a look at the Power Platform CLI reference. The reference contains information about all the commands that are available and it's frequently updated. So for example, if you want to take a look at some of the administration commands that you have, you can click on here and then you can basically see that there's loads of options available here. For example, if you want to create an environment, there is pack admin create environment, and as you can see, you can give it a name and type and domain, and it will go ahead and create the environment for you. To use the Power Platform CLI, you can use the PowerShell command line as well. So once you've installed CLI, if you hit pack, again, it will list you all the commands that you have available. If you want to go into a bit more detail, again, so in our case, let's assume we want to find out a bit more about how to export a solution. So we can type solution export help, and it will give us all the parameters that are required to export a solution. As you can see, you need to provide name, the path where you want to save the file, and whether you want the manage or unmanaged version, and a few other parameters to decide what export settings you want. So let's give it a try. So in this case, I'm going to export the XRM CI sample solution. And as you can see, I've given it a name of the zip file and the name of the solution, and I want the managed version in this case, and this is the environment that I'm going to export from. This will take a bit of time, but as you can see, once you start typing in these commands, there is a chance that you may select certain options, but then your colleague in the team may select a different options, and that's where you can get some inconsistencies. So when using the Power Platform CLI, it's good recommendation to basically create some PowerShell scripts. So in this case, I've created a PowerShell script, which basically has one parameter, which is the environment. So you can execute it. If you've got a central development environment, you can execute always from that environment. But if you've got multiple development environments, every developer can pass in their own environment. And basically all it's doing is just doing the solution export, but I'm also including some of the other settings. Like in this case, I want to include the auto numbering settings and the customization and general settings. And I want to override the existing file. So that means every time, no matter who executes the script on the team, you're always going to get the same file and settings as part of that export. So it's a good way to improve consistency, especially if you plan to use this further in the further automations. So as you can see, the solution got exported, but if I want, I can do the same thing using PowerShell script. It's just a bit simpler now. I just trigger the export script, and again, same thing will happen. Basically, we'll connect to the environment, and it will try to export the same solution with a bit more settings at the moment. So hopefully this gives you an idea in terms of what the Power Platform CLI is and how to use it. And as you can see, it's quite easy to consume. Now let's take a look at some of the pros and cons for using APIs and CLIs for implementing your ALM and DevOps. Let's start with the pros. 1. Because you are working with raw APIs and CLIs, you will have access to all the headless capabilities of the platform. 2, because you are working at the low level, you are likely to have access to new APIs before other layers in the top of the stack have time to catch up. 3, using APIs, you can build any type of tool, console apps, XRM, toolbox add-ons, and even more custom PowerShell modules. 4, you can execute PowerShell from your desktop or with some of the automation tools and CI/CD setups. This makes this option highly interoperable and portable. 5, since you are working with standard well-established programming and scripting languages, you will have access to all the standard testing frameworks out there to make sure that your code and scripts work as expected. 6, if you have pro devs on the team, they will likely find this option very familiar. Now let's talk about some of the cons of this option. 1, you will need to have programming knowledge and know many of the APIs and CLIs. 2, with the platform ever evolving, this can require a high effort to set up and maintain. And finally, if you create the perfect script that automates everything, you will still need something to orchestrate your end-to-end workflow, such as a CI and CD tool. Now let's see how this option scores against some of the key decision-making criteria. We will use a 1 to 5 scoring system where 1 is the lowest score and 5 is the highest score. 1 for knowledge and skills, 5 for early access to features, 4 for feature availability. This means how likely you are to find what you need at this level. 4 for interoperability across consumer platforms and tools. 2 for user experience. Of course, you could build the best UX on top of this layer, but the out-of-the-box interface is APIs and low-level tools, hence why I scored it as 2. And then 2 for the effort to set up, given this will require a lot of programming. And finally, 5 for extensibility. This brings us to the end of this video. Let's go through some key takeaways. Number 1, Power Apps CLI is your tool of choice due to the strategy, ease of use, and rich feature set, to name a few. 2, if you can't find what you need in the CLI, take a look at the PowerShell modules we discussed in this session. 3, use APIs if the functionality is not available in the PowerShell or the CLI. 4, APIs and SDKs are a good choice if you want to build custom apps or tools using .NET. And finally, once you've automated your processes via scripts or tools, you will likely require a CI/CD tool or a custom UX to orchestrate your processes and bring them to life. In this video, I provided you with an introduction to the Power Platform APIs and CLIs. By now, you should have a good understanding of the different capabilities and when to use them. In the next videos, we will take a look at the other options we discussed in part 1. These will primarily include CI/CD tools and the built-in pipelines. Thank you for watching. Hit the like button if you found this video useful and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future content. Have a good day.